You had everything handed to you. A private jet, designer brands, doors that opened just because of the last name printed on your student ID. But inside, you were cracking, failing every test, trapped in silence. People had let you go, teachers, friends, even your father. Until one early morning, in the quietest corner of the school hallway, a black woman pushing a mop whispered something that tore the roots out of all your illusions. You thought she only cleaned floors. You didn't know she was about to scrub your mind clean. You are Ethan Reed, 17, the only son of tech billionaire Mark Reed. Your school is Briarwood Prep in Atlanta. Marble-tiled halls, walls covered with portraits of accomplished alumni. You didn't take an entrance exam. Reed was the master key to every room. Your reputation on campus fit neatly into 3 words: arrogant, lavish, underachieving. Teachers went easy on you because of the family's donations, while classmates either envied you or hid their contempt behind polite smiles. As for you, you leaned back in your chair like it was a throne, believing that one day you'd inherit the empire. And GPA meant nothing. That night, Mark called you into his study. The light hit his gray suit, his phone resting beside an untouched espresso. "You're a disappointment. If you worked for me, you'd be fired on the spot." You crossed your arms. "I'm not your employee." Mark stared straight at you. "The world doesn't care. Either you become someone, or you'll always be a spoiled kid living off a name. I won't carry you." It wasn't a threat, it was a decision. The next day, your privileges vanished, credit card frozen, sports car repossessed, and you were riding the school bus among the screeching brakes and the smell of worn fabric seats. You slipped in through the side entrance, hearing the swish of a mop on the polished floor. There was Maya Wallace, a compact, straight-shouldered woman with calm eyes, bent over scrubbing a stubborn stain. She looked about 33, far younger than the old janitor image in your mind. While working, she murmured, "Knowing you don't know, that's true wisdom." You froze. "What did you just say?" Maya looked up, her eyes bright yet steady. "Something you're not ready to understand yet, young man." Then she pushed her cart away, leaving you in the hallway as if you'd just been yanked out of a dream. In English class, you got your test back, folded in half, cold and impersonal. You opened it. 18100. At the bottom, in red ink, did you even read the assignment? Math, 24%. History, 31%. Biology, the joke had stopped being funny. Miss Carter, the guidance counselor, called you in. "You're at rock bottom, not behaviorally, academically. 3 tutors have already quit." You swallowed hard and left through the back door, only to see Maya again, mopping up spilled soda. She gave a polite smile. You blurted out, "Last time, did you really quote Socrates?" Maya stood straight, folding her rag into the bucket. You remembered. You shrugged. "It's just strange for a janitor to quote a philosopher." Maya crossed her arms, her tone calm but sharp. Stranger still is a boy who has the world at his feet but can't pass a reading comprehension test. It wasn't loud, but it landed heavy. You looked closer. Tiny earbuds in her ears, faint gospel music playing. Her uniform was worn, but her posture was precise. "Were you a teacher?" "Not just philosophy. I taught many things before life knocked me off the track." For the first time, you dropped the smug posture. "Teach me. I don't want to fail anymore." Maya studied you for a long moment, weighing your sincerity. "One condition, leave the Reed name and your ego at the door. You'll learn from the ground up." You nodded slightly. "Deal." The next morning, the hallways were misted with early light and the scent of fresh floor wax. You carried a brand new notebook. Maya was polishing the floor in slow, deliberate circles. "You said you'd teach me." "I remember," she said, removing one earbud, "but it won't be easy." You took a deep breath. "I'm not looking for easy." "Then let's start. I'm Maya Wallace." You hesitated, then blurted, "How old are you?" 33. You blinked. "Why do you work here?" Maya folded the cloth, her eyes free of shame. "Sometimes life takes away what you thought was yours, leaving you with just two things, what you know and what you believe. I still know how to teach." The schedule was set. 1 hour every morning, reading and dialogue every evening, reflection writing. No grades, just honesty. "Learning is seeing between the lines, not just reading the words," Maya said. "When you admit you don't know, that's when you truly start." You opened the notebook. The blank page felt both inviting and daring. "What if I fail again?" "Then it means you're learning." At the end of day 1, you left the hallway with a strange mix of loss and lightness. You had shed the heavy Reed name like an ill-fitting armor, trading it for a thin notebook and a curriculum unwritten on paper. Ask questions. Be honest. Stay patient. The turning point was still ahead, but the spark had been lit. Socrates' words, the nod to "start from the floor," and a 33-year-old woman about to overturn your definition of janitor, from invisible worker to the person who would awaken you. A new rhythm took shape. 5:50 a.m. Ethan stood at the side entrance. 16 ovos. 7 has he read and discussed. In the evenings he wrote. Maya didn't lecture from an outline, she provoked. "Where does this sentence strike you? Why is the character silent? If courage had a sound, what would it be?" The first reading list she set before him was like an intellectual map. James Baldwin, Langston Hughes, Toni Morrison, W.E.B. Du Bois. "We don't just read the words, we read the silence between them," Maya said. The first pages of Ethan's notebook were clumsy. "I'm angry." Maya marked in red. "Angry at what? Name the emotion before you make an argument." "I don't understand why the character is silent." "Is it because you can't see it? Or because you're afraid to see it?" Rewrite. Ethan began to feel a new kind of fear, not of bad grades anymore, but of the emptiness in his own words. Each night he wrote about Mark, about the hollowness beneath the designer labels, about the shame of realizing how little he actually knew. At lunch, Josh Miller passed through the cafeteria, voice loud on purpose. "Look, Ethan Reed's writing love letters to the janitor." The whole row of tables erupted in laughter. Ethan shot up, heat rising in his face. Maya placed a steady, calm hand on his shoulder. "Don't measure depth with a shallow ruler." The words hit like cold water, quenching the reflex of wounded pride. They also laid out a new standard, not money, not a name, but depth. That night his phone buzzed, a message from Mark. "Academic file updated. Final warning. Turn this around or it's all cut." Ethan stared at it for a long time. For the first time, he didn't feel fear, he felt the need to face it. The next morning, during break, he asked Maya, "Who were you?" "Really, before this?" Maya leaned lightly against the mop handle, pausing long before she answered. "Assistant professor of literature and humanities in Chicago. I was the youngest on track for early tenure. I had publications, students, lecture halls. Then I uncovered a plagiarism case involving a senior leader. I refused to stay silent. The doors started closing, funding, invitations, and eventually my position. Around the same time, my husband died in a car accident on the way to a conference I organized." She looked straight at him. "All I had left was what I knew and my voice. That's enough to keep teaching." The story left Ethan speechless. The portrait of Janitor had been torn open to reveal a teacher made invisible by the system. From then on, he wrote differently, less ornamental quoting, more lived experience to weigh against the text. He began to grasp a hard truth. Academic freedom doesn't belong to the most credentialed, but to the most honest with the truth. In Mr. Bennett's class, Ethan raised his hand for the first time in months. "Sir, why does the textbook brush past slavery like it's a footnote?" The room went still. "Where did you hear that?" Du Bois, Baldwin, and a woman who knows how to ask questions. A few classmates turned to look at him. The stares were no longer just mocking. Something shifted, the axis of the room itself. That evening, Ethan submitted an essay titled "The Courage to Unlearn." Maya marked in red the spots that were beautiful but empty. But at the end, she wrote something else. "You're starting to hear your own voice." That line carried more weight than any grade he'd ever received. It felt like hearing his own footsteps for the first time, not the echo of a last name. One afternoon, Ethan brought 2 cups of coffee. "For you?" Maya raised an eyebrow. "Trying to sweeten me up?" Ethan grinned, "And to say thank you." Then he sat down, hesitating for a moment. "How much do you trust me?" Maya answered evenly, "Enough to bet on you." From her canvas bag she pulled out a worn blue book, The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois. Its margins were crowded with notes. "This book pulled me to my feet when everything collapsed. Now I'm handing it to you." Ethan cradled it in his palm like a promise. "I'll read every word, then write something real." From then on, Ethan's writing shifted tiers, less defensive, more confessional, less lipstick, more scars. He began to see the people who had been invisible, the other custodian pushing a heavy trash cart every night, the classmate working 2 jobs after school, yet still arriving on time, the teacher whose lectures soared but drew little respect. Ethan recorded these images, then returned to the text, asking, "What does literature say about justice in the school hallway?" Of course, the Briarwood ecosystem didn't stay still. Rumors spread. Josh posted a video of Ethan and Maya sitting in the old library with a mocking caption. Ethan didn't reply. Instead, he printed a short excerpt from his essay and pinned it to the public board. "Learning doesn't make me weak. Ignorance does." Ethan read. The paper was removed quickly, but the message had already found the ones who needed it. That weekend, Mark sent another short line. Last chance. Ethan sat at his desk, placing 2 objects on the wood, the notebook and the blue Du Bois cover. One was his new discipline. The other, the echo of history. He knew which he'd choose when the next storm came. And in the hallway the next morning, before the reading hour began, Maya said quietly, "Real learning isn't to pass a class. Real learning is to transform." The words didn't need explaining. They felt like a cipher just handed over, meant to be unlocked in the chapters of the journey still to come. At the end of the term, with Briarwood's hallways glowing under harsh white lights and the PA system buzzing with chatter, Miss Carter invited Ethan and Mark Reed into her office. On the desk sat a blue folder, teacher comments, a few essays marked "Clear Improvement" and "Active Participation." Ethan's hands trembled, not from fear, but from the fragile hope that, for the first time, his father might see something that couldn't be measured in dollars. Mark arrived on time, wearing a charcoal suit, phone screen still lit. Miss Carter slid the folder toward them. Ethan reached for it, but Mark snatched it first, flipping quickly through the pages, scanning each line like tallying numbers. Clack. The folder shut. "You call this progress?" Mark's voice was cold as steel. Ethan kept his composure. I'm trying, really trying. Mark's words came out clipped. With who? Your last tutor quit. Ethan glanced at Miss Carter, then said slowly, Maya Wallace. Half a beat of silence. The janitor. A sharp, mocking laugh escaped Mark's mouth. You're learning from someone who mops floors? Ethan didn't flinch. She used to be an assistant professor, and she sees me. Mark leaned in, voice low and razor-thin. You're tarnishing the Reed name. From now on, you either stop seeing her or you lose everything. The card, the car. The name? Ethan could hear his own heartbeat, but his answer was clear. Maybe I need to lose everything to know who I am. Mark stood, shoved the folder aside, and walked out. The door closed, leaving behind the scent of expensive cologne and a cold vacuum in the room. That afternoon, Ethan didn't hide in the gym or the parking lot. He went straight to the public bulletin board, printed an excerpt from The Courage to Unlearn, and pinned it up. Learning doesn't make me weak. Ignorance does. Ethan Reed. By the next morning, the paper was gone, but the words had already found their audience. A few glances softened, a few texts read, Meet at the old library tonight. That evening, the abandoned library became a secret classroom. Maya arranged the chairs in a circle, no podium, no microphone. Here, she said, there's no name, only ideas. The first group included Ethan, Priya Patel from biology, and 2 classmates from history. Maya opened with Zora Neale Hurston. If you're silent about your pain, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it. She turned to Ethan. What's your pain? Ethan swallowed hard. Being seen as a last name, not a person. Nods rippled through the circle. The next week, the group grew, 5, then 8, then 10. They read Morrison on the power of language, Baldwin on the burden of freedom, Weaving and Langston Hughes like quick jazz breaks. Maya didn't go easy. This line is pretty but hollow. Rewrite it from your gut. Don't quote to decorate, quote to illuminate. They left the library only when the security bell chimed low, eyes still lit with fire. But the spread of something good always triggers the system's immune response. One rainy afternoon, Ms. Green, the vice principal, called Maya to her office. Her tone was all business. We've had concerns. Why are students spending time outside class with a custodial staff member? You don't have a teaching credential here. This isn't standard procedure. Maya replied evenly, I'm teaching. Ms. Green cut in, It's not in your job description. Maya met her eyes. Neither is saving a kid, but I did. The meeting ended with an official request to cease all unofficial instruction. News barely escaped the hallway before Ethan was fuming. I'll call my dad, write to the board, go to the press. Maya's hand landed on his shoulder. Not yet. Your voice has to stand on its own without the Reed name. Ethan bit his lip, turning shock into a slow burning resolve. One morning, Maya texted Ethan to come to the old library earlier than usual. The room was as still as a narrow chapel. She set a notebook on the table, looked straight at him. It's time I tell you something no one teaches. The secret of real learning is transformation. She spoke slowly, weighing each word. People learn to pass, to recite, to survive. But you don't change that way. You change when something inside you breaks, then rebuilds stronger. It's messy, it's painful, it's deeply personal, but it's real. Ethan sat silent, like holding fire in his chest. Maya reached out, touching the blue Du Bois cover in his hands. This book pulled me to my feet when everything fell apart. It will give you a second self, the self that knows how to see others. "How will you know I'm transforming, not just faking progress?" Ethan asked. Maya's smile was tired but warm. "When you're no longer afraid of shame, when you name your fear, name your privilege, name the pain of others, that's when your voice will sound different." She stood, pushing the mop toward the door. "Next time someone asks how your learning is going, don't say, 'I'm improving.' Say, 'I'm becoming a person.'" Ethan stayed long after she left, running his hand along the edge of the blue cover. He knew the next test wouldn't be a grade, but a moment, somewhere, when he'd have to choose meaning over safety. Outside the window, rain still misted over Atlanta. Inside him, a small sun had just turned on. From that day on, Ethan walked into class differently. No more smug posture, no more glancing around like a wealthy tourist. In history, when the teacher skimmed past the slavery chapter in the textbook, he raised his hand. "Sir, why is a nation-shaping experience for millions of people reduced to a footnote?" The room went still. The teacher hesitated. "Where did you get that argument?" Ethan answered plainly. Du Bois, Baldwin, and a woman who asks better questions than she answers. No one clapped, but the magnetic field of the room shifted. Outside of class, Ethan noticed things he'd never seen before. The second custodian pushing a heavy trash cart close to midnight. Priya washing dishes at a diner with a book tucked under her arm. Mr. Bennett preparing lectures with care, yet receiving little respect. He wrote in his notebook, "Glory tends to be loud, dignity is quiet." Maya didn't praise the line. She asked, "So who do you owe, and how do you plan to repay it?" He rewrote, crossed out, rewrote again. His voice grew thicker. The secret class kept growing. 6, 8, 12 faces. They debated language as both tool and chain. They underlined Toni Morrison's line, "The function of freedom is to free someone else." Some nights they cried when a classmate admitted, "I've never felt smart a single day in my time here." Maya listened intently, then handed back the key in question form. "What do you want freedom for?" Each student held their pen like a key. The system didn't sleep. Miss Green sent a letter reminding them to cease unregistered gatherings. Parents called in. Josh kept mocking online. Ethan didn't answer. He built instead essays, questions, bridges between people, but storms tear through clouds eventually. On Friday, Ethan got his essay back from Mr. Bennett. A bright red A blazed on the title page, "The Courage to Unlearn." Beneath it, "You've found your voice." Ethan slipped the paper into his folder and hurried to his home garage, heart beating with a rare joy he wanted to share, not flaunt. Mark was standing by his new electric car, Bluetooth in ear, discussing a takeover. Ethan waited for the call to end, then held out the paper. "Look at this." Mark skimmed it. "A joke? It's my English essay. I got an A. An emotional diary isn't academics." Ethan drew a breath. "It's about learning as transformation." Mark snapped his fingers, tossing the paper onto the passenger seat. "Who put this nonsense in your head?" Ethan stood tall, not dodging. "Maya Wallace." Mark stepped in close, his voice dripping venom. "You've lowered yourself to learn from someone who mops floors?" "She was an assistant professor, and she saved me from emptiness." Mark's words were sharp. "End it with her, or you lose everything, money, the car, the name." Ethan's fingertips trembled, but his voice held, "Maybe I need to lose, to become someone not because of Reed." Mark looked at him like a stranger. "Pack your things. It's over." The next morning, when Ethan ran to the side entrance as usual, Maya was gone. The mop was propped neatly in the closet, The coat was missing, the bucket empty. A whispered message passed around. Budget cuts. No notice, no goodbye. A security guard had walked her to the gate before dawn. Ethan stood frozen in the hallway, hearing the faint echo of a basketball bouncing somewhere far away, like his heart inside an empty chest. In the days that followed, Ethan's grades slipped, not because he didn't know, but because the fire lacked a spark. The secret class dissolved, the library fell back into haunting silence. Priya texted a "keep going" with a flame emoji. Ethan replied with a picture of the Blue Du Bois cover taken in the dark. He kept writing, but the pages were less warm. Then a bold printed flyer appeared on the main hall bulletin board. End-of-year speech contest. Theme: what does it mean to win in life? Open to family and community. Scholarships, recommendation letters, prestige. For many, it was the next rung on the ladder. For Ethan, it suddenly became an arena. That night, he sat at his desk, setting his notebook and the blue cover side by side like levees against a flood. Between them lay a blank page. Ethan wrote the first line, "Not for grades, not for applause, for the truth." He closed his eyes, thinking of Maya's hands on his shoulder in the middle of mockery, thinking of her words. Don't measure depth with a shallow ruler, thinking of the moment she told him, "The secret is transformation." He opened his eyes, pen touching paper, words spilling out. He told the story without pleading, about the smell of floor wax in the early morning, where a young janitor taught him to see words as cuts, to hear silence like a bell. About losing privilege but gaining courage. About how one line from Morrison became a contract with himself. His freedom must make someone else freer. And he titled the speech, "Winning is not standing over. Winning is lifting someone up." Inside Ethan, the fire was back, not sparked by a last name, but by a voice building its own source. Somewhere beyond Briarwood's campus, would Maya hear that silent call? Ethan made himself a promise. If he couldn't bring her back with power, he would call her name under the public lights. And this time, nothing would stop him from stepping onto the stage. The flyer for "What Does It Mean to Win in Life" clung to the bulletin board like a dare. People talked about scholarships, recommendation letters, wait lists for top schools. Ethan looked at it and saw a different door, a door to speak the truth in front of a crowd, no dodging, no hiding behind the family name. He opened his notebook and wrote at the top of the page, "Not for grades, not for applause, for the truth." The speech's frame appeared like a rib cage. Opening, a short, tight confession. I had everything handed to me, but inside I was hollow. Body, the story of Maya Wallace, the 33-year-old woman with a mop who taught him to read between the lines. The mornings when the hallway still smelled of floor wax, the nights of scribbling and crossing out until his hand ached. The line, "Don't measure depth with a shallow ruler." The secret that real learning is transformation. Climax, the truth about her firing and how the system crushed what was working. Closing, redefining victory, not as standing over others but as lifting others up, not as being seen but as knowing how to see. On the first night, Ethan brought his draft to the old library. Priya and 3 others from the secret class were already there, chairs in a circle. "Read it out loud," Priya said. His voice still trembled as he read. Priya cut in. "Your opening's fine, but the middle's too guarded. Less I did, more I didn't. The times you failed." Another friend added, "Don't tell Maya's story for her. Tell what Maya did to you." A third said softly, "Say her name, no hinting." Ethan wrote as if taking a prescription. One fear still sat under the surface. Naming Maya on stage meant confronting the system again. But without it, the speech would just be another pretty phrase. He struck out the words "a janitor" and wrote Maya Wallace. The next day, Mr. Bennett read the draft and refused to give empty praise. "This line's pretty but hollow," he said, drawing a red slash. "You write, 'I'm grateful' 10 times. Why are you grateful? Give an image. Give the price you paid." He offered a technique. Open with an image, like the smell of floor wax in the morning. End with a line people can carry out of the room. Ethan nodded. He replaced "I'm grateful" with "her hand on my shoulder in the middle of hallway laughter," and "the smell of floor wax sticking in my memory like a scent of rebirth." In the middle of drafting, Mark's text hit the screen. "Don't tarnish the Reed name. If you mention janitor, don't come home." Ethan placed the phone face down, looking at the blue Du Bois cover on his desk. He wrote a reply in his notebook instead of sending one. "I will tell the truth. If the name can't survive the truth, then I have to survive without the name." The afternoon before the contest, Ms. Green summoned him to her office. Her smile looked printed straight from a brochure. "Your speech should be positive. Avoid controversial remarks about school personnel." Ethan kept his composure. "I'll be respectful, but I have to be honest." Ms. Green pressed each word. "Honesty has boundaries." Ethan answered, "My boundary is the truth." They held each other's gaze for a long beat. The conversation ended with her reluctant nod. That night, the secret class met for a mini dress rehearsal. They sat like an audience. Priya played the skeptic, asking the hard questions. If she's just a janitor, why trust her over your teachers? Ethan answered, "Because she asked questions that made me ashamed but honest, while too many classes made me safe but hollow." Another asked, "Are you afraid of your dad?" Ethan pressed his lips together. "Yes, but I'm more afraid of not having a voice." Priya looked at him and gave the slightest nod. "Good. Keep that vein in you when you're on stage." The night before the contest, Ethan stood alone in the darkened auditorium. Just the sound tech testing the lights. He walked up to the podium, placed his hand on the wooden edge, cold. Closing his eyes, he heard Maya's voice. "Real learning is transformation." He whispered back, "Telling the truth is transformation." The nerves didn't disappear, they reshaped into focus. The next morning, Ethan chose his outfit. Dark blue shirt, dark trousers, plain shoes, no glittering name tag like before. He slipped a small paper into his pocket. Just 3 lines of reminder. Opening image, floor wax, dawn, empty hallway, say the name, Maya Wallace. Closing definition, winning, lifting someone up. The auditorium was packed. Parents, students, a few alumni. The front row held a sponsor in a fedora. In the wings, Ms. Carter stood with arms folded, eyes encouraging. Mr. Bennett nodded once. Ms. Green whispered something to the organizers, glancing toward the stage. Josh sat among his teammates, half smirking, half bored. Ethan waited backstage, his heartbeat like a bass drum. The MC called his name, Ethan Reed, Briarwood Prep. Ethan stepped out. The lights poured down like cold water. Silence thickened. He set his hand on the podium, felt his lips dry, took a breath. The opening he'd rehearsed came out. I had everything handed to me, but inside I was hollow. The room didn't stir. The silence leaned in. He went on. I thought I needed higher grades, until one day I met the smell of floor wax at dawn and a woman who could ask better questions than any answer I'd ever heard. Behind him, Priya shifted in her seat, gripping the program. Miss Carter let out a quiet breath. In the back row, a figure sat still beneath a scarf, eyes bright and wet, Maya. Only a few former students recognized her. Ethan hadn't seen her. He was looking straight at the crowd, about to speak the name. Her name is Maya Wallace. In that instant, Ethan understood. By saying her name, he would lock the speech into truth, and there would be no way back. Maya Wallace, Ethan pronounced each syllable as if placing a stone in the middle of the room. She had no office, no podium, only a mop and a heart big enough to see through my anger. A few murmurs rose from the sponsors section. In the middle rows, Josh smirked. Ethan didn't look away. She taught me to read between the lines, to write from the gut, to be ashamed in the right places, ashamed of what I didn't know. He shifted gears, lowering his voice. She was fired. They called it budget cuts. The air tightened. Miss Green turned to whisper something to a colleague. Ethan didn't single anyone out. Instead, he named the mechanism. Sometimes a system doesn't fix what's broken. It strikes at what's working. When someone without power gets students to truly learn, it becomes inconvenient. He paused half a beat, looking up. I used to think winning meant being seen. She taught me that greatness doesn't come from being seen. It comes from the ability to see others. The front row leaned forward. At the back of the room, Maya gave the slightest nod, her eyes shimmering. Priya covered her mouth. Ethan painted images instead of slogans. Dawn, an empty hallway, the smell of floor wax like the scent of a beginning. She told me, "Don't measure depth with a shallow ruler." She handed me Du Bois' blue-covered book, the one that pulled her to her feet when the world collapsed. She said, "Real learning is transformation." And I began to realize my real test had no grade. It happened every day I chose meaning over safety. He took a breath, moving into self-exposure. I looked down on people. I hid behind my family name. I called my classes boring, just because they demanded honesty. I was wrong. And a woman with no official authority put me in my place, starting from the floor. Somewhere, a low hum of approval slipped out. Mr. Bennett bowed his head with a small smile. Now came the redefinition. Ethan straightened his back, his voice finding its tempo like a musician locking into rhythm. So, what is winning? Winning is not standing over. Winning is lifting someone up. Winning is not being seen. Winning is seeing. Winning is not a score. Winning is transformation, and using that transformation to open doors for someone else. The auditorium was utterly still, as if hearing the click of a lock turning open. Ethan held up his notebook. I'm not saying this for points or to make anyone uncomfortable. I'm saying it to honor someone who has gone unhonored. If today anyone asks me how my learning is going, I won't say I'm improving. I'll say I'm becoming a person. The last line dropped, hit the floor, and rippled outward. A single clap broke from the left corner, then another. Then applause rolled across the room like steady rain. People stood. Priya cried. Miss Carter clapped until her hands reddened. Mr. Bennett let out a small whistle. Even a few usually distant teachers blinked back tears. In the athletes' row, Josh shoved his hands into his pockets, eyes sliding away. Miss Green kept a weary smile that couldn't hide the unease in her gaze. Ethan stood still for a moment, not bowing yet. He looked over the sea of faces and found her. Back row, dark scarf, gentle eyes. Maya didn't step forward, didn't wave. She only smiled and placed a hand over her chest, as if to say, "We're all right now." Ethan swayed slightly. Every morning of floor wax scent, every night of red ink, every humbling moment folded into that one nod. When Ethan stepped backstage, the noise seemed to follow him. Miss Carter hugged him tight. That wasn't just a speech, that was a class. Mr. Horsas Bennett extended a hand. Welcome to the craft. The organizers smiled politely, mixed with discomfort over the budget cuts line. A school paper reporter asked for his manuscript. Friends lined up for high fives. Priya pointed toward the back door. She was here. Ethan's breath caught. Where? Priya shook her head. She left the moment you bowed, the way she does everything. That night, the speech video appeared on the school's page, then was shared by alumni with the caption, "The Reed heir thanks the janitor who saved him." The title was a beautiful paradox. Alumni added hashtags about justice in education. A professor at a local college tagged a colleague. "Anyone know Maya Wallace? Want to invite her to speak?" An education journalist messaged for a weekend newsletter interview. The spread wasn't the noisy kind of scandal. It moved quietly because it touched a nerve everyone had, the memory of an unsung teacher who once pulled them back from the edge. Ethan lay on his back in bed, the ceiling still, his phone lighting up nonstop. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he opened Du Bois' blue cover and read a passage he'd underlined, about double consciousness, about the gaze of others and the struggle to reclaim one's own. He smiled at the strangeness. Tonight, under the lights, he had seen himself more clearly by speaking about someone else. In a modest apartment just a few streets from Briarwood, Maya sat at her table, removed her scarf, and poured a glass of water. Her phone buzzed with an invitation from a local college's writing department. "We'd be honored if you'd share about your question and reflection method." Maya leaned back and closed her eyes. A door she'd thought shut forever had quietly opened, on the voice of a boy who once wrote in the scent of floor wax at dawn. The morning after the speech, Briarwood felt like it had a fresh coat of paint. The hallways still carried the scent of floor wax, but the looks people gave were different. Less judgment, more curiosity, with a trace of respect no one could quite name. Ethan's speech clip had climbed from the school's page to the alumni feed, then jumped to a few local education forums. The description kept repeating itself into a new refrain. "The Reed heir thanks the janitor who saved him." The phrase felt both paradoxical and painfully true. At lunch, Ethan walked into the cafeteria. Josh Miller sat among his friends, looking like he wanted to toss out a joke but couldn't. His smile stalled. Priya gave him a thumbs up, her eyes red from both lack of sleep and pride. Mr. Bennett passed by, offering no empty praise, just a small nod. The kind you give when you've watched a student stand up straighter on his own. That afternoon, Ms. Green sent out an email clarifying the message. "The school values all staff, including our custodial team, for contributing to the student experience." No one mentioned Maya's dismissal. Ms. Carter, on the other hand, sent Ethan a private note. "Proud of you. Keep your back straight." Maya's phone buzzed nonstop all morning. A writing department at East Atlanta Community College invited her to speak about her question and reflection method. An education magazine asked for an interview date. A nonprofit serving under-resourced students wanted to book her for a weekend workshop. Maya stared at the blinking screen in half-belief. She had trained herself to expect nothing beyond a day's work that paid the bills. Yet windows she thought sealed shut were cracking open, thanks to the voice of a boy who once wrote beside the dusty window of an abandoned library. That night, Ethan got a terse email from Mark. "You shamed the Reed name in public." No subject, no emotion. Ethan set the phone down, opened Du Bois' blue cover, and read about double consciousness, the gaze of others and the right to reclaim your own. He underlined a line and wrote in the margin, "I've chosen my own eyes." In the days that followed, Ethan threw himself into schoolwork as if a deadline flag was planted right in front of him. He rewrote conclusions for his essays, submitted makeup work for group projects, asked teachers for blunt feedback. Though Maya couldn't return to Briarwood, she read every paragraph he emailed her and sent it back marked in red with questions that cut deep. This part is pretty, but empty. Here you're hiding fear behind a quote. Strip it away. Ethan revised, winced, then revised again, like an apprentice whittling until the real grain showed. By the second weekend after the speech, the local paper ran a short piece, From Mop to Podium, Maya Wallace and the Invisible Classroom. It didn't sensationalize her life. It described her Socratic method, her writing discipline, and how one student shifted from being seen to knowing how to see. On Monday morning, East Atlanta Community College sent an official offer, adjunct instructor in reflective writing and critical thinking for 2 semesters, with the option to add evening community classes. Maya printed the letter, smoothing the edge of the paper like a mother brushing a child's forehead. She sent a single message of thanks to the one who'd made the connection. Not a donor, but Priya, the girl who'd tagged her name under the department's post. Meanwhile, Miss Chia Green faced a flood of uncomfortable emails. Some parents asked, why fire someone who's helping students succeed? She clung to the phrase budget cuts, but even long silent teachers began speaking up in staff meetings. That kid is learning for real. Don't kill what's working. Words like that were rare at Briarwood. Now they were written into the minutes. Ethan closed out the term with a first-time feeling. Not every grade was an A, but his chart climbed steadily, accompanied by comments he valued more than any number. Proactive in questioning, improved depth of argument, developing a distinct voice. Acceptance letters from prestigious universities arrived. Mark sent him a link. Ivy League isn't bad. Ethan stared at it for a long time before replying with a single sentence. I'm choosing a small school, focused on social justice and education. I want to teach the way I was taught. The typing ellipsis appeared, then vanished. No reply came. One sunny afternoon, Ethan brought an envelope to Maya's apartment. The small room had an old wooden table and a deep green pothos by the window. Maya opened the door, surprised. You didn't have to come all the way here, Ethan smiled. I did. He handed her the envelope. Inside was his high school diploma, an acceptance letter from Brookside College, a liberal arts school dedicated to social justice, and a handwritten note. Maya read, frowned slightly, then looked up. Ethan spoke aloud. I want to build a place, somewhere people can learn the way I learned, honestly, deeply, without shame. I want to call it the Maya Institute, if you'll let me. Maya held her breath. In her mind, mornings of floor wax scent, pages marked in red, and the questions that had once stripped a rich boy's armor flickered past like a reel played fast. Why my name? Ethan answered without hesitation. Because everything I am now began with you. And because there are hundreds of kids like me, or nothing like me, waiting for a door like that. Maya set the envelope on the table, her fingertip pressing the proposal page as if sealing it. Only one condition, she said. Ethan met her eyes. What's that? We do it together. They began planning that very afternoon, in pencil, on graph paper. The location would be an unused community center in the next county. The schedule, morning read and write circles and evening reflection groups. Tuition set at $0, replaced by a commitment. Read, write, show up on time. Books sourced from the city library and alumni donations. I'll handle the curriculum, Maya said, her eyes bright in time with her pencil strokes. You handle outreach, small fundraising, and publicity. Ethan nodded, eyes blinking between fear and exhilaration. Do you think my dad will come? The question hung in the air. Maya smiled. Don't invite the Reeds. Invite Mark, a man who can learn again. Ethan left at dusk. On the worn brick steps, he paused, turned back. You know, he said, I used to think I just wanted to be seen. Now I want to see. Maya nodded. That's enough to start a school. The sign for the Maya Institute hung on the front of a freshly painted, once-forgotten community center. White background, black letters, simple to the point of bare. Inside, the walls were lined with donated bookshelves, long wooden tables sanded smooth, and plastic chairs arranged in a circle. The class schedule was chalked on the board. Morning, 6 or 7 Haas, reading and dialogue. Evening, 7 Hot 9 Haas, writing and reflection. In the corner sat the blue cover shelf, copies of Du Bois, Baldwin, Morrison, Hughes, Hurston. One space was reserved for Maya's own blue-covered copy, kept in a clear box that anyone could open to touch and read her pencil notes. Word of the opening spread through Briarwood alumni, parent groups, and a few community organizations. Priya designed the posters, Mr. Bennett brought a box of books, and Miss Carter handled the volunteer greeters. Kids who'd been written off, labeled lazy, slow, or troublemakers, arrived early, peering in through the windows. Maya opened the door without asking grades, only names and what times they were free. On the sunny morning of the opening, Ethan ran back and forth between the gate and the registration table. Suit and tie? No. Just a simple shirt with rolled-up sleeves. Maya stood by the board, no microphone. At 9 ho sharp, Ethan raised his hand for quiet. Thank you for coming. There's no long speech today, just an invitation. He looked at Maya. She gave a slight nod. Maya stepped forward half a beat, her voice warm and unforced. We don't hand out diplomas. We hand out questions. We don't have grades. We have commitments. If you're ready to be ashamed in the right places and honest in the right ways, this space is yours. She paused, then added, When I lost everything, a book pulled me to my feet. Now, I want us to pull each other up. Applause rippled. The first class began immediately, like a living declaration. 12 students sat in a circle. A 12-year-old boy labeled attention disorder. A 14-year-old girl who loved to draw but feared writing. A single mother hoping to study for a better job. Maya opened with a passage from Baldwin. She didn't lecture. She asked, Where does this line hit you? One shy hand rose, then 2, then 3. The trembling hands became writing hands. Outside, Ethan managed logistics, but his eyes kept flicking to the door. He didn't dare expect, but hope stretched tight across his chest. Near noon, a black sedan pulled up to the curb. Mark Reed stepped out. No bodyguards, no show. He stood at a distance, leaning lightly against a lamppost, hands in pockets, looking through the window into the circle of people inside. No introductions were made. He didn't step in. Ethan saw his father, froze for a second, but didn't rush over. He turned back inside, continued handing out books, pouring water, taking names. From the front of the class, Maya caught sight of Mark's figure. She gave Ethan a small nod, as if to say, Let him learn in his own way. After the reading session, Maya opened the door. Mark walked up slowly, without a polite smile. Hello, Mark, Maya said first, as naturally as greeting a parent. Hello, Ms. Wallace, Mark replied, his voice stripped of steel. He looked around. The old bookshelves, the mismatched chairs, the blue cover shelf in the corner. I didn't expect to come here, he said, eyes resting on a child hunched over in concentration. I didn't expect to open this place either, Maya answered with a half smile. Mark turned to Ethan. hesitating like someone learning to read. Your speech made me angry. Then it made me quiet. That night I watched it again. Twice. I didn't expect to cry. The air sank for a beat. Ethan pressed his lips together. The cold months at home, the pack your things like a sentence, they all rose, demanding to be addressed. But his mouth released something else. I didn't expect to forgive you this fast. He looked straight at his father. But if you're here as Mark, not as Reed, then I'm ready to relearn how to be your son. Mark exhaled, as if lowering an invisible suitcase. He turned to Maya. Thank you for doing what I, with all my power, couldn't do. Maya shook her head. I just asked the questions. The rest did itself. Mark extended his hand, not a pen for a donation check, but the hand of a father. Ethan took it. The hug came late, but it wasn't empty. It carried the scent of fresh paint, old paper, and a hint of sweat from moving furniture. In the afternoon, the writing class began. Ethan sat on the edge of the circle, holding his pen like he had in Briarwood's hallway. Maya looked around. Don't say thank you. Write one line to someone you want to truly see today. Pens scratched. A 12-year-old boy wrote, I want to see my mom less tired. A 14-year-old girl wrote, I want to see myself not afraid of words anymore. Ethan wrote, I want to see my dad as someone learning to love again. Mark, sitting in the back, didn't know what his son wrote, but when Ethan looked up, their eyes met, and a small nod replaced every word. Word of the Maya Institute spread. A late-night writing session that went until 10 p.m., because a single mom refused to leave until she fixed her ending. A reading circle where a boy, once punished for being disruptive, asked the best question of the night. A wall corner covered with first paragraphs from people who thought they had no voice. The local paper returned, this time interviewing students instead of Ethan. They all said the same thing in different ways. Here, I'm seen. As the crowd thinned in the late afternoon, Ethan and Maya leaned against the bookshelf. Was today good? Ethan asked. Good, Maya said. So good it's scary because it's real. She nodded toward the corner. Tomorrow, 7 a.m., we polish the floor again, in every sense of the word. Ethan grinned and asked questions. Maya nodded, and right from the gut. Outside, the Atlanta sky turned gold. On the Maya Institute sign, the sunlight lit up the uneven brushstrokes, the marks of human hands. It was beautiful in the way only something handmade could be. Imperfect, but honest. And in one corner of the city, a once invisible classroom now had an address where people could knock. Every morning, the Maya Institute's lights clicked on at 5:45. Ethan ran his eyes down the sign-in sheet, checked pens, paper, and water pitchers, then turned on low background music, just enough to hear. Maya arrived at 10 to 6, set her canvas bag down, rolled up her sleeves. They didn't say much. Their familiar rhythm was its own signal, ready to read, ready to write, ready to be ashamed in the right places. One afternoon, an envelope marked City Inspection waited by the door. Ethan tore it open and read in one breath. Failed fire safety requirements. Missing exit signs, smoke alarms needing replacement, sprinkler system incomplete. Deadline, 14 days. After that, the facility would have to shut down temporarily. Ethan gripped the paper's edge. Maya took it, read slowly. She nodded. No arguing, we fix it. Ethan did the math, $15,000 for sprinklers, signage, and alarms. Current funds, $2,000. He tipped his head back, inhaling deep. Names of students scrolled through his mind like a ticker. The 12-year-old who wrote, I want to see my mom less tired. The 14-year-old who wanted to stop fearing words. 14 days. Closing wasn't an option. That night, an email arrived from Mark. The Reed Foundation was willing to fund the upgrade package, along with an attached media proposal. Logo, signage reading, Reed Learning Center, powered by Maya Institute, and a press conference. Ethan stared at the screen, his throat dry. He printed it and set it in front of Maya. She read to the end, stayed quiet, then looked at him. Gifts aren't innocent, but don't refuse too fast if it keeps the door open for the kids. Ethan nodded, but his heart snagged on the name. He replied, proposing anonymity. Minutes later, the Scene checkmark appeared. No response. They organized an emergency open house fundraiser for the weekend. 100 people, x $150, $15,000. Those who couldn't give cash could work. Painting walls, installing signs, checking wiring. Priya handled posters. Mr. Bennett brought in a crew of retired electricians. Ms. Carter coordinated volunteers. In the evenings, the library circle turned into a workshop. Hammers pounding, drills whirring, paint rolling. Maya smiled wearily when a single mom brought joint supplements and strong hands. The kids wrote essays titled, "Why I Need This Place to Stay Open," and plastered them across one wall. In the chaos, Briarwood sent an invitation for Ethan to speak at a faculty meeting. Talk about the secret class and how to support at-risk students. Ms. Green was CC'd. Ethan thought about the old hallway's floor wax scent, about the day Maya was walked out. He replied he would come on one condition. Maya co-present a session on the question and answer method. 3 hours later, the reply was curt. Not appropriate. Then came a private email from a teacher. Don't back out, we need to hear this. The meeting took place in Briarwood's multi-purpose room. Ethan stood before rows of teachers. Maya sat in the back like an observer. He spoke about writing discipline, about shifting from being seen to knowing how to see. When a teacher asked, "What's the one thing that a student needs most?" Ethan answered without pause. Someone willing to ask questions that make him ashamed but honest. He turned toward the back row. That person is sitting right there. Heads turned. Ms. Green's jaw tightened. A few teachers broke into spontaneous applause. Afterward, 4 of them gathered around Maya, asking about question scripts, reflective writing rubrics. Maya just offered to email her materials. She didn't take the podium, but her lesson plans quietly made their way through the school. On day 10, Josh Miller showed up at the institute, holding the hand of a braid-haired girl, his sister. "She hates writing," Josh muttered, glancing around as if afraid to be seen. Maya welcomed them in. That night, during the reading circle, the girl wrote her first 3 lines without erasing. Leaving, Josh stumbled. "Thanks, Ms. Wallace." His voice caught. Ethan watched them go, remembering Josh's cafeteria laughter. In his mind, another person's pride-bending was also a kind of transformation. On day 12, the fire department announced they'd be inspecting early. 1 sprinkler head still missing, exit signage incomplete. Money, again, the Achilles heel. That night, the fundraising link ticked up slowly. 23%, 41%, 60%. At 9 p.m., a $10,000 donation landed. The note read, "A father learning to listen." Ethan read it 3 times. He didn't ask, didn't call. He just typed 1 line beneath the appeal. "We're fully funded. See you in the morning to install the last head." Inspection day, the old electrician joked. "First time I've ever installed sprinklers for literature." The inspector walked every corner, tested alarms, checked the glowing exit signs. He made notes, nodded. Passed. The certificate slid into a metal clip like a charm. Maya sat down in a folding chair, face in her hands, laughing until her eyes brimmed. Ethan leaned against the wall, the corners of his eyes burning. The air smelled of fresh paint, metal, and something else, light as rain just passed. That afternoon, Mark stood in the doorway, not stepping in. Ethan came out. They stood on the sidewalk, traffic rushing behind. Mark spoke first. "Anonymity was the hardest thing I've done." Ethan answered, "Thank you for leaving the door under Maya's name." Mark looked at the sign, then at his son. "If you need more, call me directly. No logo, just a plan." Ethan nodded. Thanks were enough. They didn't hug, but the distance halved. A week later, Briarwood sent a new letter, proposing a summer reflective writing program for teachers, led by Maya, budget covered by professional development funds. A note at the bottom read, "Share resources, maintain academic independence." Maya smiled. "That talk wasn't wasted," Ethan added, "and silence at the right moment works too." They signed. On the last night of the month, the Maya Institute hung a small sign near the door. "Anyone who enters here is seen." Handwritten, the strokes a little shaky. Ethan flicked on the lights, looking around the room. The blue cover shelf, the wall of first lines, mismatched chairs, an old standing fan creaking in the corner. Imperfect, but right. He reminded himself, tomorrow they'd polish the floor again, in every sense, and when he turned off the lights, the night sky reflected in the glass like a blank page waiting to be written. 2 years passed like water under the bridge. Ethan was now in his final year at Brookside College. Classes by day, back to the Maya Institute at night. Priya had become a teaching assistant, coordinating writing groups. Mr. Bennett led a short course called Writing and Citizenship. Ms. Carter trained the volunteer mentors. After a summer training session, Briarwood brought the reading-writing circles into their Civic Week curriculum. Ms. Green no longer appeared in message adjustment emails. Instead, there was a photo of her sitting quietly in an evening writing class at the Institute, taking notes. Maya, now 35, spent more time teaching than speaking to the press. She liked to joke, "I'm not made for cameras. I'm made for chalk and ink." But the outside world had taken notice. A national award for community education innovation announced its shortlist, and the Maya Institute was in the top 5 initiatives. Ethan read the email and laughed. "Look, we made the finals." Maya raised an eyebrow. "We are the students. If we win, you send them up to accept it." The awards night was held in a grand hall at the National Civic Learning Forum. Blue stage lights, a backdrop so formal it made you want to loosen your tie. Backstage, Ethan's hands were cold. Maya set a hand lightly on his shoulder, just as she had years ago in Briarwood's hallway. "What's the new measure?" she asked. Ethan swallowed. "Not being seen, seeing." Maya smiled. "Go." When the MC called his name, Ethan walked out. He didn't start with sponsors or funding thanks. He started with an image. Dawn, the scent of floor wax, and a woman who could ask better questions than any answer I'd ever heard. The audience murmured softly. He told, briefly, of a hollow boy pulled back from the edge by a question, of the blue cover shelf, of the first line wall. He didn't lead with statistics. He led with faces. The 12-year-old who wrote, "I want to see my mom less tired." The 14-year-old who wanted to stop being afraid of words. The single mother who finished her first CV in 10 years. Then he shifted, grounding the story with numbers. "In 2 years, over 300 students have come through our doors. 78% stayed for at least one full read-write cycle. 62% improved their academic or professional writing. 41 returned as volunteers. But the strongest part isn't in the percentages, it's in how they name things. Fear, privilege, dreams." He looked to the front row. Mark sat there, No logo, no secretary, alone. His eyes glistened. "Some say greatness comes from being seen," Ethan said. "But I learned the opposite. Greatness comes from knowing how to see others." He paused for half a beat, then let the next words fall like an oath. "And sometimes, the one who teaches you the most doesn't wear a suit." She holds a mop, quotes philosophers when no one's listening. Her name is Maya Wallace. She didn't just raise my grades, she brought my soul back. Applause broke like a wave. The MC invited the representative to receive the Crystal Award. Ethan stepped back and motioned for 3 students. The boy, who was 12, now 14, the girl, who was 14, now 16, and the single mother. They were trembling, but stood tall. Maya stepped up beside them, no microphone in hand. She only placed a hand on each back, like an invisible pillar. After the ceremony, reporters swarmed. Ethan answered a few questions, gently steering the spotlight toward the students. One journalist asked, "What's next?" Ethan replied, "Replicating the simple thing. Mornings reading, afternoons writing, evenings reflecting. Keep the door open, don't screen by grades, and ask questions until it hurts." The journalist laughed. "Doesn't sound easy to pitch to donors." Ethan winked. "Then pitch transformation." Late that night, they left in a borrowed car. In the parking lot, Mark waited under a lamppost. He approached, not with "I'm proud of you," but with "Thank you for letting me see." Ethan smiled. "I just asked the question. The rest, you did." Mark turned to Maya. "Thank you for not giving up on him or on me." Maya nodded. "We're all students here." The 3 stood in the yellow light for a long time. Then Mark looked at Ethan. "Dinner at home?" Ethan glanced at Maya. She shrugged. "Go, then polish the floors early tomorrow." In the weeks that followed, the Maya Institute opened a second site in the city's west side. No big sign, no banners. Priya ran the new branch, teaching evening classes after her university hours. Josh Miller, once the mocker, now volunteered on Saturdays to set up chairs because his sister wanted to learn to hand-letter posters. Briarwood announced the teacher program as part of the official curriculum. Ms. Green signed her name in the bottom corner. Mr. Bennett received an outstanding teacher grant. Ms. Carter became the timely text contact for dozens of at-risk students. One evening, Ethan locked up late. He switched off lights one by one until only the hallway glowed. Maya stood in the blue cover shelf corner, her fingers resting on the frayed spine of a book. "First day," she said softly. "You asked me, what if I fail again?" Ethan grinned. "You said, then it means you're learning." They fell into a comfortable silence. Outside, drizzle slicked the street, laying down a sheen like floor wax. Before leaving, Ethan taped a handwritten note on the wall. The letters neat. "Winning is not standing over. Winning is lifting someone up." Below it, he signed simply, "Ethan," no "Reed." Beside it, in marker, Maya added, "And winning is clearing away the illusions that block your view." Underneath, she drew a tiny mop, only visible if you looked closely. That night, as they closed, the scent of floor wax still lingered. The tiles reflected the light like a still lake. They stepped out, pulling the shutter down. And on the line between being seen and seeing, there was a place that would still switch on its lights at 6 a.m. the next morning, ready for more new hands, more first lines, and more people becoming themselves. Ethan and Maya's story isn't just a journey of learning. It's proof that real strength lies in the ability to see and lift others. So, what do you think winning in life really means? Achieving for yourself, or helping someone else find themselves? If this story inspired you, hit like, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe for more meaningful journeys ahead.